So, welcome to the Purpose Beyond Burnout podcast, Karyn. I have a wonderful guest for you today who has an amazing story to share. I can't wait to dive deeper into Karyn Whitaker's story. Karyn Whitaker is the founder of a company called Try Harder is BS. And one of the things she says is, we've all been told to try harder, but I had it on every school report. Those teachers were assuming things that don't just stack up, that I wasn't trying, that more of the same would make a difference, that the occasional flashes of high performance they saw came without huge amounts of fatigue. Oh my goodness, there is so much more I could talk about, Karyn, but let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Karyn, welcome this morning. Welcome. I am so glad to have you. Please let the audience know more about you and we can dive right into the conversation.
Fine, Chippo. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. You've said that I am the founder of Try Harder is BS, but I've had multiple careers before that. So I've been a project manager and still am part-time, but I'm moving away from that. I've been a community development worker, I've been a social worker, and of course I've been a nurse. And drifted through those careers with varying degrees of success and varying degrees of burnout, which is the story I think we're exploring today.
Absolutely. And I think really there is something special about your story because there is an angle that is not always told. And I think one of the questions that I want to ask you to really dig deeper into this is, how was the decision made for you to go into nursing? Was it originally your decision or was it someone else's dream? And then I think many people in different professions, not just in healthcare, may admit this, but may not want to say it out loud. But what was the internal conversation that you had with yourself when you were a nurse and just living in that space?
So we
Clarify that for
need to go
us.
back quite a few years. I was 18. I'd just found my first boyfriend and I caught glandular fever, mono, your side of the pond. And that was just as I was sitting my A-level exams. So despite high projected grades, I had disastrous A-levels. So the university place I thought I was going to study psychology did not happen. So I found myself post A-level, unemployed, at home. I need to mention that my parents are both nurses, and
Right.
my grandmother, who I idolized, wasn't a nurse, but would have given her right arm to have been her nurse, which is probably why my father was one of the first male nurses in the country. So that tells the story all on its own. So I'm unemployed looking for work, and my mother's saying, "You could apply for nursing. You'd get in for nursing, you know, you could apply for nursing." There was no way I was going into general nursing like they were doing, but I had done some volunteering with children with learning disabilities while I was at school form
Yes.
and quite enjoyed the school setting. Should have gone teaching, perhaps. So I applied for nursing, specialising in working with people with learning disabilities. And I remember I applied in December, and there were 2 intakes a year, one in January and one in December. And it was December, and I applied thinking, one in January, one in September. It was December. I'm thinking the January school will be full. It's fine. That'll give me timber with my mum off my back. As you alluded to, fate took over. I was interviewed on the 23rd of December, and they offered me a place to start on the 6th of January. So Christmas that year was a whirl of preparing to move into the nurses' home, because it never occurred to me that I could say no, because no wasn't in my vocabulary at that age. I knew that no was going to get me hit, so no was not an option. So I moved into the nurses' home and started my nurse training. It wasn't for me. From the beginning, it wasn't for me. And the story that I told myself was, or maybe that I was encouraged to tell myself was, look, you've got good O-level results, poor A-level results. So I'm not sure what that is in Canada, but good results at 16, poor results at 18. if you now drop out of this one, no one's ever going to hire you for the rest of your life. So you have to see
Wow.
this 3 years through. That was the belief. By the middle of my third year, I was really struggling, crying for hours. And Mum decided that the best thing to do was for me to move back home from the nurse's home and drive myself in every day for my shifts, because then I would be getting more support. And I put that in inverted commas, because that wasn't support to do what I wanted. That was support to keep me doing what I should be doing. So somehow I got to the end of that. It
Wow.
was tough. It was
Karyn, you worked as a nurse for years after that.
for about 2.5 years after that. Yeah.
2.5 years. And your experience, or even not even just in nursing, as I mentioned, the healthcare, how many people do you think ended up in careers that were not theirs to start with? How many people ended up pursuing careers that were their mother's dream, their grandmother's dream, their parents' dream?
If I go back, there were 6 of us in my class for nurse training. And
Mm.
2 of those people, it was their dream job. So 2 that were loving it, 2/3 that were there for other reasons. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I can totally identify with that as well.
Yeah.
Like working as a pharmacist, there are people that you come across in the field that just love what they do. They love the work they do. But I totally identify with taking a profession that is encouraged because it's a stable job, because it's higher income, there's prestige that comes with it. It's known as a noble career. And so people around you sort of encourage you to get into that profession. And
Yes.
then you find yourself years later, a lot of money in down the line for those that get student loans. And you have this career that wasn't yours to begin with. And how hard is that?
It's absolutely, absolutely. And I did move on, and I moved on to work in a children's home with children with learning difficulties, which actually wasn't in a hospital setting anymore. That was in a social care setting. And that's how I qualified as a social worker. But I think I just want to come back to how I ended up in nursing as well and reflect on that. I was brought up in quite an abusive home, but I didn't know, because every child believes that their experience is normal.
Yes.
And we looked at child abuse while I was nurse training, and we looked at emotional abuse. And I was like, don't be silly, that's normal. And then I did my social work training and we looked at it again, and I was like, that's my normal. Oh my God, that's not normal. And I had a complete breakdown while I was social work training. Went to the doctors, got put on antidepressants, and the doctor's like, what do you do? So I told him, and he was, that must be so rewarding. My
No.
God. But I was severely depressed and burned out. So I just went, yeah, because that was the easy thing to say. And
That is the easy thing to say and expected thing to say. And I'm sure even at that time, maybe right now, people are much more open to the conversation of, I don't want to be a nurse, a doctor, or
yeah,
somebody who is, caring for others. And that is maybe caring for others in that sense, but there are so many other ways that you can care for others. But there are certain professions where in those days and certain years, it would be frowned upon for you to even think or
oh,
say
yeah,
that that was not something that was giving you fulfillment.
yes,
And yet, we are all born with certain gifts and skills and certain innate abilities that when we tap into those, and I think it's even an innate affinity
mm,
towards certain tasks.
yeah,
So you knew that at least you had enjoyed being with children. So I grew up in Zimbabwe, which was former Rhodesia.
yeah,
And so we had O levels, we had A levels,
yes,
we did Cambridge exams. So really very similar. We actually had the English system as part of the Commonwealth. We really adopted the English system for everything. And so African parents really just wanted you to get a noble, either doctor, engineer, lawyer, all those professions that were seen as the ones that were worthy of being. And so that's what people went and did.
I not got glandular fever and succeeded in my A levels. My parents pushed me hard to look into medicine. I refused, but I was going to study psychology, so I wasn't going to end up far away, was I? And I think when you've got that abuse in your background, you want to do better, you want to care for other people, but you do it at your own expense. And I still want to help people, but I want to do it without setting fire to myself.
And that's exactly it. I'm sorry to hear about the abuse you went through. And I think people may resonate with the fact that you can actually live an abusive childhood and not realize that this is abuse because that is what your normal looks like.
Yeah.
And it's only when you finally are outside of that system that you realize I was abused. And so fast forward to you are on antidepressants, you are working as a social worker now with children with learning disabilities. What was the trajectory forward for you?
I wasn't in a good place. My manager was an absolute bully. I should have done something about it when on my first day in the job, she said to me, I don't know how we're going to make this work because I didn't want you to get this job.
Wow.
And with hindsight, I should not have gone, well, it's okay because I'm going to prove to you how good I am. I should have gone, I can't work with this woman, do something about it. But hindsight's great stuff. I'm a lot older and wiser now.
Karyn, you are just dropping such powerful nuggets. And I don't know if you were going to talk more about bullying in the workplace, but that is another topic on its own that I think maybe I need to bring you back for. But just maybe give us a bit more of that, because I think that is something that happens a lot in workplaces where people just swallow the abuse in the workplace as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And abuse was what I was used to. So I knew the problem was me because
you thought the problem was
of course
you.
the problem was me. And from the beginning, I could never do anything right. And this person, will call her Susan.
Okay.
That wasn't her name. And Susan wanted to help me to do better. And the way that she helped me to do better was to constantly tell me everything I was doing wrong. So I never got it right. We introduced one-to-one supervision whilst I was working there. And there were 4 of us in the senior team. So there was an officer in charge, myself as deputy, and then 2 assistant officers in charge. And as we introduced supervision, the officer in charge and the 2 assistants, who were the people that Susan wanted to get my job, one of them should have got my job, not me.
Yes.
They all supervised staff, but I was never allowed to. I needed more experience first.
Right.
I was put in difficult positions quite often. The officer in charge's best friend came back from maternity leave. And suddenly, even when I was on a shift on my own, and I can connect it now that it was the shifts when Susan's friend was working, things went wrong on those shifts. Things always went very wrong on those shifts. And I was always pulled into the office to explain it to the officer in charge why things had gone wrong.
Yeah.
And it was always my fault. And it was years later in therapy that I connected back that these shifts were the ones where Susan's friend was working. To this day, I don't understand those people. I
Yeah.
really don't understand why and how you would decide to make someone's life a misery like that.
That's absolutely true.
In therapy, people are in therapy to deal with people in their lives who won't go to therapy. Those people needed help, but I needed
And
help as well.
I think one explanation that really resonated with me was that hurt people hurt people. So the only people that would go out of their way to make your life miserable at work and identify all the things that you do wrong are probably people who have gone through some sort of abuse, who've been hurt so much by other people. And instead of saying, I will not perpetuate this horrible behavior in the workplace and make someone else miserable, they say, as soon as I have a little bit of power, I am going to go ahead and exercise that power, that same abuse that I experienced on other people. And that's what's going to make me feel powerful. So it never really works. And I think sometimes it takes so much for people to end up learning, and some never learn, that no matter how much you abuse the next person, that will never help you to heal from your own abuse.
Yeah.
But when you are able to break the cycle of abuse and say, my manager was horrible with me, I know now what not to do, what not to model, and I will do so much better. And it's only when we take that attitude, that heart posture, that we are able to start breaking cycles of abuse in the workplace or at home or in any setting. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that and you felt so powerless. Now that you're older and wiser, in hindsight, what should you have done? And what should someone who is working in a toxic environment do today to break that cycle?
The key is to recognize it. And as I say, at the time, I believed it was my fault. So that would have been very difficult for me to do anything about. But if I was in that situation now, on day one, I would have challenged that statement of, I didn't want you to get this job. I wouldn't have just gone, oh, well, I'll do my best. I would have said, that's a really powerful thing to say. And that makes me
Yes.
feel extremely uncomfortable. I think that's going to make it very difficult for us to work together. I think we
Because
should
you're
perhaps
already biased.
speak to a more senior manager about how we resolve this problem.
Yes.
At which point, I'm sure she would have backed down, because most bullies are cowards at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
suspect
So
she would have
stand up.
backed down. But
Stand up for yourself.
yep,
Don't be afraid
speak.
to stand
And
up for
don't be
yourself.
afraid to escalate it. Because by the time I did escalate it to management, and I did, it was about 6 years later, escalate it to management. But by that time, management had already been told a story about me, because I'd been there for 6 years, about what a problem I was. And so when I
Yes.
went in and said, look, I've got this dreadful situation, it was like, yeah, I've heard about this, and your problem is,
Yes.
Yeah.
So don't wait. I
Yeah.
think what I take away from what you're saying or what I hear from you, Karyn, is know your worth. You need to know your worth. You need to understand what you bring to the table. And
Absolutely.
don't accept abuse and stand up for yourself. And even if the management don't believe you or don't act, that then lets you know that I'm not valued in this
I was in a
place.
union.
I need to start weighing my options.
Yes.
Oh, you were in a union even.
I was in a union. It never occurred to me to go to the union.
There you go.
Yeah. I had so many options, and I was scared to walk away. I was scared that I was unemployable. I was scared that I was not worth anything.
Believing all the lies
Yeah.
that you were unemployable, that you could never find anything else.
Yes.
It really is a mental prison that you have allowed to chain you
Yes.
to this situation.
Completely. Yeah. But it's not all doom and gloom. I did escape eventually.
Yes.
Pregnancy saved me, interestingly. I fell pregnant
Yes.
with my own daughter, and I was very ill. I had hyperemesis, which is morning sickness on steroids. People recognize that pregnancy comes with morning sickness. I have morning, noon, and night sickness. I was 7 stone 3 by the time I delivered my daughter, and I'm 5'7" tall. So I was incredibly underweight, because I basically didn't eat for 9 months. But that did mean that I was off work sick. And that 9 months off work sick allowed me to reconsider my place in the world. So I went back after my maternity leave, because otherwise I would have had to pay back the wages that I'd been paid. But I knew I was only staying until the end of that period to pay back the wages. And at the end of that, I left and went into project management, and I have no regrets.
That is so wonderful. And Karyn, even though you had such a tough journey, there is so much that we can learn from it. I know it is not wasted, because now here you are transferring all that knowledge to those that are coming behind you and empowering those that come behind you to know that it's not always you. It's good for us to be introspective and say, could it be me in this situation? Once you've done your introspection and you've analyzed the situation and asked people around you, and you realize that it is actually the system, or it is the people, the management that are not treating you fairly, then it is our imperative to stand up for ourselves, to believe in our worth.
As a project manager and as a manager for many, many years since then, I have always done the opposite. I have always wanted to make my staff feel valued. I have always wanted to coach and teach my staff and help them to develop. And I have always wanted to see my staff move on and succeed. And I always end up managing excellent teams. Aren't I lucky?
Absolutely. I believe that. I believe that our experiences in life, if we are wise enough to learn from them, then we can really use them to make ourselves
Yeah.
better. Always say, when I walk into the room, I always am more inclined to talk to the underdog, the person who seems to be the least important in the room, because I was that person for the longest time.
Yes.
And so I realized that they have so much value and they might not be acknowledged, but once you encourage them, then you will get the loyalty, you will get the excellence out of them. And I think
Absolutely.
for you, it's managing those teams in an excellent way because you definitely understood what type of feedback not to give, what type of environment that will allow people to flourish
Yeah.
in. And that's what you created, something that you didn't have,
Yeah.
but you were intentionally creating spaces of excellence for
Absolutely.
your teams.
But alongside that, I don't tolerate poor performance from my staff. And my amazing daughter, she's grown up now, but she said to me one day, I was having to fire someone
Okay.
and not feeling good about it, obviously. And she said to me, Mum, you don't fire people. They fire themselves. You have given this person every chance to turn it around, and they have chosen not to take it. And suddenly it was much easier to do the more difficult parts of managing because, I had given that person every chance to turn it around. And
That's absolutely fantastic to hear. And I think as someone who's been a manager and run my own business as well, I think when you find someone who's struggling in a role and just not cutting it, they are probably misaligned.
yes,
And the way I look at it, if someone needs to be let go, I don't believe they're being fired, but you're actually releasing them to find their excellence, to find their strengths. Because wherever they are right now is probably not the best place for them.
a
But I have
lovely
no
way
doubt
to
in my
put it.
mind that when they enter into a different space that accentuates their gifts, their talents, then they're able to shine. So it may seem, what I always say is, this is not the space for you. This is not the space where you're going to excel.
Yeah,
But believe me, there is a space for you where you will excel.
absolutely.
And you may not know it now, but once you enter into that space, you will realize that this is where I was meant to be.
Yeah, that is such a lovely way to put it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's something I can
I
take away from here. And
believe that for
so,
sure. Yeah.
as I'm getting somewhat older now, my health is not great and I can only work part time, which means I can't do the type of project management I want to do. So, I have decided to put to use everything I have learned about supporting and coaching people, everything I have learned about helping people to do well, everything I have learned about being autistic and having ADHD. I was 58 when I was diagnosed, but everything I have learned about having those conditions and to actually help people who have autism and ADHD and the people who help people with those conditions to do better because try harder is BS. I really believe that. And there are easier ways. And it's taken me nearly 40 years of my working life to learn those easier ways. I
Oh.
don't want other people have to go on that journey.
Karyn, would you define for us, is it AUDHD or are you calling it ODHD?
It's AUDHD.
AUDHD. Define for us what AUDHD is and why try harder is BS for maybe the mom or even somebody who's older who's just been diagnosed and doesn't really understand what does it really mean for me.
So this is a combination of ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I'll come back to that in a moment, plus autism. Now, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is incredibly misnamed. I don't have a deficit of attention, I have an excess of it. What I don't have is great ability to control where that attention goes. My brain decides what it's interested in, and if it's more interested in hearing the ceiling fan than you today, I would really struggle to hear what you're saying. Autism is, for me, largely a sensory disorder. So I am very sensitive to noise, to emotionally charged environments, to overwhelm, to just too much going on. So, big shopping centres with lots of lights and nowhere to rest, things like
Yes.
that, I find very difficult. But my autism also enables me to really focus into something that interests me and to really go deep with that. So I
Okay.
use that, people call it a special interest. I use that special interest to learn about my own conditions and what I could do to make my own life easier. And I think what I would say to anybody listening is find what your strengths are. So one of my offers is a strengths-based coaching. Find what your strengths are, because the way you develop is you practice things and you get better at them.
Yes.
But if your innate ability on something is 2 out of 10, yeah, no matter how much you practice, and you practice a 10 out of 10 on that, you still only get 2 times 10. So you only get 20% of that skill because of your innate ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so attention to detail. I've got ADHD and dyslexia. I can't pay attention to detail. So now I outsource that. I get other people to do that for me because that's not what I'm good at.
Wonderful.
But creativity, I'm probably a 9 out of 10. So if I work on my creativity, I'm going to get to 90%. If I don't work on my creativity, it'll stay at 9%. But if I work on those strengths, I can gain much more. So by finding what your strengths are and developing them instead of constantly focusing on what are my weaknesses, how can I do something about that? Play to your strengths, find other people with the strengths that you don't have. A
Yes.
team needs to be people who are different to you, not people who are like you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that so aligns with purpose beyond burnout. Also, what I talk about, which is when you even choose a career, as I help people to pivot their careers, whether you are in nursing, whether you're an optometrist, a dentist, there are certain things that you probably do really well within that profession, and there are certain things that you probably don't do really well. And so pivoting your career to position yourself in a way where you're offering your strengths, where you're doing the things that actually give you energy as opposed to the ones that drain you, actually help you to advance more because you're working with your strengths, your innate strengths, and then strengthening them. Like you said, once you've identified what you're inclined to do well at, then you'll begin to sharpen those skills. And with sharpening those skills, then you are able to excel and not
Yes.
be facing so much resistance as you try to maybe excel at doing something that really you have no business trying to do because it's far from your skills. And no matter how hard you try, you're only going to get to a 40% after so much effort.
Yes. So, detail and proofreading is not my skill base. But there are people who are so good at that, who don't let a missed comma or capital letter, or in my case, missed word or half a sentence, won't let that slip past and take great delight in finding that in my writing. So by me struggling and doing that badly, I'm denying those people their opportunity to shine. It doesn't make any sense.
That is so true. That is so true. Oh my goodness. This is wonderful, wonderful to hear. How much of your identity then was tied to being a nurse? I think that was a question I had for you, but even just preemptively, I suppose none of it was. But maybe how much of the identity was yours and how much was maybe you sticking to it because that was what society expected of you to stay in there? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I think the identity as a helper I still hold, but that nursing was the wrong mechanism to deliver helping. That was someone else's mechanism for how I should help and how I should show up in the world. And I think, let's be fair to those people, it was all they knew. And they knew I was a helper and they knew nurses could help people. So that was obviously the way that it fit together because there was nothing else on their map. I don't think they intended to push me into something that would give me multiple nervous breakdowns. I don't think they intended to be abusive. I think it was all they knew. And I think it was something my mother said to me when she was looking after my daughter when my daughter was little was, it's okay now I'm a grandma because I can spoil her. And by spoil, she meant be nice and treat and praise and so on. And that was spoiling a child. And interestingly, her definition of spoiling was not that far from my definition of decent parenting. So she was a better grandma than she was a mum. And my own grandmas were definitely better grandmas than they were mums. It's something of a tradition in my family. But I chose to raise my daughter differently.
Would you say your mother did the best she could with the knowledge she had at the time?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's what it comes down to. It's what they knew, how they were brought
Yes.
up,
Yes.
that is what she thought was
But I
best.
would also say that when she was presented opportunities to learn more, because mum trained us, actually went back. So mum was in nurse training when she got pregnant with me and had to leave because, we're talking 1960s. And mum actually went back and did her nurse training about the same time as I did mine. And in that, she had lots of opportunities to learn about emotional abuse, about mental illness, etc., etc. And she chose to model that through her own lens that said, no, these people just need to try harder.
Okay. Yes.
These people
So
don't
that's
deserve
on
sympathy.
her.
These people need to pull themselves together. So, yes, she was doing the best with what she knew. But when things came along that challenged that worldview, she wasn't about to take them on.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. So, yes, we'll give people, our parents, our guardians, grace for what they did that they didn't know better. But also, it's also good to hold people accountable for the lessons that they refused to learn, for the changes that they really resisted
Yes.
when they knew, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, tell me about the transition from you being in nursing and knowing that this is not for me to you getting into project management and just finding your space where you were able to excel and shine. How did that feel?
It was amazing, partly because my first project management job was also my first part-time job. So I was a new mum and I was able to work part-time. So that helped tremendously. Put us under immense financial pressure though, because my partner was at university. So it did put us under, so it wasn't fantastic because the pressures changed. But once I got into better paid project management, it was just, it's suddenly life becomes much easier because you're much more, as you say, aligned to your purpose and work doesn't exhaust you as much. You start to see your own success and you start to believe that you're a useful person. It's, as I say, this idea that I always end up managing amazing teams. When that first started happening, I genuinely did think that I'd just dropped lucky. But once it's happened 4 or 5 times in a row, you start to see a pattern and you think there is a common denominator here.
Oh, that's
And you
wonderful.
finally work that out. And the more I can encourage people to shine by using their strengths, the more those people succeed. And it's just wonderful to watch.
That's awesome. And so, what I'm hearing from Karyn here today is if you know for sure that you are in the wrong place, that you are not able to use your gifts and skills, then don't hesitate to begin to try to find those spaces. You can start with small steps. We don't make changes in a big rush or overnight. So, try to experiment with different things that you could do and see how you feel and see where really your space is where you are going to shine. And there is something I believe that there are skills transfer as well. Karyn, I don't know if you want to share yours, but even when you move from nursing to project management, I'm sure there are certain skills that you're able to take along with you and translate to this new space where you are shining.
I think people is one key theme. No matter what we do, we work with people. And if you learn ways to work with people, that is a skill that will serve you in any setting. I think the other one that I took from nursing and residential care was two things. One is about documenting the processes so that everybody knows what's going on. That certainly transferred across both. But the thing I took into project management that wasn't there for other people, in nursing, caring professions generally, you do your shift, and what's not done on your shift, you hand over to the next shift. Whereas in office work, there is this tendency that you work 9 to 5, but actually, if the work's not finished, you work till 7. I've never done that. If the work doesn't fit
Wow.
in my shift, it needs to change. It needs to fit somewhere else. And I think,
That is profound.
yeah,
As a healthcare worker myself who has worked in retail pharmacy and then in supply chain and then as a consultant, I noticed that difference the first time I moved from patient care to supply chain.
yeah,
I knew my shift was over when I left the pharmacy, when I left the building. And
yeah.
when you go to supply chain and you're working with email, it's like, okay, you should have checked your email after hours. And that was always, I think that is so profound that you implemented that in the project management world. That's something I will take away for sure.
Yeah. A colleague took me aside early in my project management career and said, you'll find that as you get more senior, you're expected to work longer hours and not get paid for it. And I said, or I am good enough to deliver in the hours that I do work. And I made a decision then that I would be good enough to deliver in the hours that I do work.
Amazing.
So when I'm at work, I work hard. I don't waste my time faffing around water cooler, doing the lottery tickets, etc. I work hard. But I work
Yes.
hard because when my shift finishes, I want to go away and have a life.
Wow, that is so, so powerful. That is a powerful skills transfer that I will be carrying with me and sharing with friends. I think that needs to be spread around because it's needed.
Yeah.
You find that corporate, even teaching, there's a lot of burnout in
Yep.
teaching and corporate simply because of those things that, your shift is over, but there are lots of emails that you haven't managed to check and people are scrambling to check them after hours. I was like you. I never took them home, but I never spread. I think people just realized that they can get me between this time and that was fine. But I never really shared that with the teams I was working with. So yeah, that's powerful. Wow, if you could go 20, 30, 40 years back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Tell her she is loved, that she is loved and she can be amazing.
And for someone who's feeling stuck today and has no idea what the next step is, maybe is feeling misaligned, maybe is realizing that they've been abused and didn't realize, just realizing that maybe everything was perfect and is suddenly falling apart now at an older age and
Yep.
thinking, I'm too old to pivot.
I would say find someone to talk to, not necessarily family or friends. It could be a professional, a coach, a therapist, but find someone neutral, not involved in the situation to talk to, not even to talk to. Find someone who will listen to you. And that could be a written journal, actually, but find someone to talk to, let it all out, pour it all out. Because once you have emptied all that BS out of your head, it will make space for other things. But as long as you're holding all of that, the space for the other things isn't there. So somehow you need to release all of that toxic stuff and let it go.
And Karyn, who are you working with right now? Who's your ideal client with Try Harder SBS? Is it people with AUDHD or are you coaching professionals?
I'm I'm working with people who have ADHD and autism. My ideal client is possibly a woman because I relate to women. Because there's that intersectionality of being a woman and having these disabilities. And I think it's people who are done with finding life so hard and just want to move on. I'm not saying I only work with women, I don't. I coach a lot of men as well. I'm also working with coaches, therapists, and helpers who want to know more about how to work with neurodivergent people. Because if you're in coaching, helping, therapy in some way, some of the clients you're working with are neurodivergent. You may not know it, they may not know it. But some of the clients that those helpers are finding difficult are probably clients whose brains work different to theirs. And by learning a bit more about that and learning some tools to be a little bit more imaginative and work differently, I can help lots of helpers to help more people. So there's those two
Wow.
strands.
That is amazing work that you're doing. And we will put Karyn's details in the show notes and her website so you can get hold of her. If you are at the intersection of ADHD and autism, or you are a helper, a parent that want to know more of how to support your loved one who's living with AUDHD, then Karyn is the person to speak to because she has lived it. She has overcome a lot through her career. This year, I think, Karyn, you'll be turning 60, which is amazing. You look amazing and you are just getting started. And I believe that there's so much more that you're going to do. So, yeah, if you are feeling that maybe you're too old to pivot or, it's a mental state, it's all in your mind. And once you decide that you want to leave this earth after emptying all the good stuff that you have to share with your generation, then don't look back, don't stop. Keep on knocking on doors, keep on searching for that thing that's going to help you to just align with purpose. And that is one of the most important things that we can do. What does living in alignment look like for you now, Karyn?
It involves matching my activity to what my body can cope with. It involves matching my sensory stimulation to what my brain can cope with and making sure that there is time in my life for the things that I love, for my family, for my crafts, for my home, for walking, but still being available enough to help the people that I'm helping.
That is so wonderful. I think that also aligns with what I talk about a lot. Like, you want to be able to serve and use your gifts and skills to serve the world, that you also want to be able to have time to do the things that are meaningful to you.
Yes.
And if that means spending more time with your family, spending more time with your children, then you don't want to sacrifice all that for something that is not the most important thing to you. If you look back 20 years from now, what is it that's going to really matter? And make time for that. Make time for the things that are important to you.
Yeah.
I think International Women's Day is coming up on Monday, on the 8th. And I wanted to share a message here that I saw released by the We Forum. So We Forum says we celebrate the progress made by our mothers, daughters, and granddaughters, our nieces. However, it's shocking that it's projected that it will take another 123 more years before gender parity with men is achieved. Surely we can do better. So the research has shown that even though women have made so many strides over the decades, gender parity will still take another 123 years at the rate that it's going. And I have such a heart for moms in healthcare. With Purpose Beyond Burnout, I work with moms in healthcare who feel misaligned, who feel burnt out, and I work with them on their journey to finding recovery from burnout. I work with them in finding aligning with purpose, whether they want to stay in healthcare, whether they want to pivot their skills and move to something that's different. There are so many ways that you can get those skills transfer and move into even manufacturing, maybe non-clinical positions, but still in healthcare, whether it's NGO work, whether it's advocacy work, there is so much that can be done. And there's so much that can bring that fulfillment and balance in life where you're able to do the things that are important to you and also make a difference in the world. And I think you are the perfect example of what I've been talking about all the time. And I think I will use your story a lot more, Karyn, that you were one person who knew that this nursing was not the right profession for you, but you didn't have the ability to advocate for yourself. I didn't know enough. I was just somebody who was blank at the time after my A levels, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So a beloved aunt of mine said, I have a wonderful pharmacist, and I think you would be great in pharmacy. And I was like, okay, I'll go and study pharmacy. But
Yeah.
the first year of pharmacy school, I already knew I don't think this is really what I want to do. But also for me, I had the ability of learning many different things. So it was not that hard for me to do well in pharmacy school.
Yeah.
And even though I was studying the work and being able to get the good grades, I still knew that there was a part of me that wanted to be expressed, but I did not know how to express that. I did not know really how to pinpoint it. It's only in hindsight now that I gained clarity that I really knew that this wasn't for me, but I had no idea what it is I wanted to pursue. And I think my son is the same. My son
Yeah.
is 17 now, and he is not really sure about what he wants to do. And he used to say to me, I don't know what I want to do. One day it just clicked in my mind, and I was like, you know what, son? You do know what you want to do. You absolutely do know you want to do. The only thing that is happening now is that you have no clarity of what your options are. I said, imagine yourself in Japan or in a foreign country, and you are sitting at a banquet, and there's a buffet of 100 different foods that you have never tasted in front of you, and you're hungry. And then you say, I've never tasted all these foods. I don't know what I want to eat, and thus I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
Is that a good solution? And he says, no. I said, so what would you do? And he said, I would get a plate and take a little bit of everything, and I would taste. And after tasting, I would know which foods I like. And then I would take a bigger plate and dish out the foods that I liked. And I was like, exactly.
Yeah.
If you did not know what you wanted, then even after tasting so many of them, then you wouldn't be able to identify what you want.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the fact that you know that you don't know what you want means that you just haven't identified it yet.
Yes.
You haven't come across what you want. Otherwise, you would have said, I want to be a doctor.
I think we're so hard on young people, expecting them to know. Honestly, Chippo, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. If I ever grow up, we'll worry about it then. But they have such limited experience of the world. We put them in classrooms. We isolate them from most of the work that goes on in the world, and then say, what do you want to be when you leave school? And we don't say, what do you want to do? We say, what do you want to be? Which puts it at an identity level, not an activity level.
Right.
Yeah? But it's not a be, it's a do. And I have done many different things, but I didn't become any of those things. I was still Karyn.
Yes.
So what do you want to do? And it doesn't have to be forever. We were sold the idea,
Yes.
40 years ago, we were sold the idea that whatever you did your degree in, that's what you were going to be doing for the rest of your life. The world is not like that. I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 different careers because I've done 2 different types of project management, and I did community development work as well, might be 6. So, I've done half a dozen different things, and I'm now starting on another one. It's not a once and forever decision.
And you would find that within those different titles, there may be things that you were doing in each of those.
Yes.
Right. As you said, people management would go across.
Yeah.
So whatever their title is, there are certain activities that you do well that you carry with you with those different titles. And so
Yes.
breaking it down to an activity level and not a title level is key. I think that was just one really amazing nugget that you just dropped there. It's not about what the title is, it's about the activities that you're doing. And you can even design your career these days with certain activities that you want to do, and then you can package them and offer them to the world. As you said, you are outsourcing people who have attention to detail. So if somebody was to say, I have attention to detail, I love sorting things out, then they could just be a consultant who does just that,
Yeah. You
you
could
know?
be a proofreader. Yeah. Yeah. Or
That's awesome.
you could always work with spreadsheets or anything else that requires detail. Yeah.
Hmm.
There
Yeah,
are more jobs out there that you've never heard of than there are jobs that you've considered. And with the
absolutely.
internet at your fingertips, you have opportunities that I could have dreamed of as a young person.
Yes.
Get out there and experiment.
Yes, yes. And I think as young people, this is the time to actually go and experiment before you spend 8 years studying one thing or 4 years, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Go out there and experience different activities and then decide exactly where your strengths lie and what you want to refine and, accentuate and then go with that. That is so powerful. Thank you so much, Karyn. You have shared so much wisdom with us and you've been dropping nuggets of wisdom, and I will take so much from this and share it as well with the young people in my life so that they will be able to make more informed decisions.
Thank you.
What one message would you love to leave with the people who are listening today?
Oh, it has to be just try harder is BS. Why would you say that to anybody?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Maybe go deeper into that. Where did the name Try Harder is BS come from? And why is it so important for us to understand that
It comes
trying harder
from
is not the solution?
It comes from my school reports. Honestly, every teacher said that I could do better. I had so much potential, but I wasn't trying. ADHD didn't happen to girls in those days. And a feature of ADHD is that when you're put under enough pressure, you can perform. But it leaves the most
Oh.
enormous bill in physical and mental exhaustion. So the teachers saw great exam performance, top of the class in exams, can't do it in class year round, but she could if she tried. So, yeah, so try harder is bloody stupid, a bad suggestion, and the obvious one. It is when you say to someone try harder, you're assuming that more of the same is what's required, and it almost never is. I don't know if you've come across the book Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price, but
No.
that book lays out an academic analysis of laziness and why Devon says it doesn't exist. And that was a real turning point for me, that it's not about
Yes.
trying harder. It's about finding what the problem is and doing something about that. So all the teachers who said your exam work's good, but you could try harder in class, didn't take into account the fact that in the exam, no one's allowed to talk to me. There's no noise. No one can distract me. No one can interrupt me. No one can ask to borrow a pen. Then I can perform.
Wow.
Whereas in the classroom, I don't have any of those conditions. And if you gave me those conditions, maybe my classwork would be different. I don't know. But
Wow.
it's about finding what is the barrier and addressing that so that you can actually make success easy.
Thank you so much. It's not about trying harder or pushing against the wall. It's about going around the wall and finding the gate
Yes,
and opening it and going through it.
yes.
That's the visual that I just got
That's
with
a
you
lovely
saying that.
metaphor. Yes.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much, Karyn, for coming. You will find Karyn's details in the show notes. Please show her some love, follow her on social, and find out more about how you can benefit from Karyn's services. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much for inviting me. Bye bye.